This is arguably the best experience I've had with a gaming laptop by far. And incidentally, this might also be the best Razer Blade. As its name suggests, the Razer Blade 15 OLED has a beautiful OLED display capable of 240Hz, a powerful Intel Core i9 and RTX 3070 Ti combo, and a great thermal solution all packed in a thin and light chassis. Now, it is expensive, no doubt about that, but this time around, it might actually be worth considering. So here's the Razer Blade 15 OLED, and if you're anyway familiar with the Blade series of laptops from Razer in the past 5 years or so, this should be pretty much an iconic design by now. It's a clean slate that's 16.9mm thin and weighs just about 2 kg or about 4.4 pounds. Honestly, it's really sleek, really minimalistic, and it's just basically a blacked out MacBook Pro in a sense, but with performance far surpassing most in its class. If you're a fan of the design, you're definitely going to love it. And even if you aren't, you have to admit that it's one beautiful looking laptop. The one huge change, however, with this very model is immediately apparent once you lift up the lid. First thing you'll notice is that instead of the usual anti-glare matte coating, you get a glossy glass-like finish instead. And the reason for that is simply because this is the OLED model, and thus you get a properly good OLED display. To keep it short, this is downright fantastic and arguably one of the best OLED displays we've seen on a laptop by far. First up, unlike most other OLED-equipped laptops that feature either a 1080p or 4K resolution at 60 or 90Hz, this has an 4040p resolution and can run at a staggering 240Hz. That's right, not 120Hz, not 144, not 165, 240Hz. So needless to say, this is a fantastic display for gaming. Colors are great and vibrant, the blacks are truly dark and deep, everything just looks so much more beautiful, especially when compared to even a really good IPS display. Games like Cyberpunk 2077 and even Modern Warfare 2 just pop that much more, making for a really stunning image. But yet at the same time, you don't lose anything in terms of refresh rate. 240Hz with a 1 millisecond response time is just snappy and fast, perfect for gaming. Additionally, if you're a fan of HDR, this can do it too. Though admittedly, Razer did not go through any proper official certification for HDR with this very display, but Windows 11 does report that this specific display on our model at least can hit a max brightness of 616 nits, so in practice, it's not too bad an experience. On the other hand, if you're looking at this from a professional perspective, it's equally great as well. This covers 100% sRGB and DCI-P3, which will help people such as editors and graphic designers alike. All in all, it's just a great OLED display, and honestly you aren't losing much, especially compared to IPS offerings. This gives you a better visual experience, but yet you're running at the same refresh rate as IPS offerings nowadays. It's kind of insane. The only caveat here might be the fact that this uses a glossy glass-like finish for the display, unlike the usual anti-glare matte coating that's found on most gaming laptops. But you really have to pick your poison here. Would you rather have the vibrant and rich colors from an OLED display but deal with mirror-like reflections and practically be quite unusable in direct sunlight outdoors? Or would you rather take a hit in terms of the colors and vibrancy and even perhaps a little bit of sharpness and opt for an anti-glare matte coating instead, so it's much more versatile and can use it practically anywhere? Well, it's your decision. Your choice, you choose. Oh, and one other thing. Razer has somehow not implemented any form of OLED care for the OLED display. It pretty much performs just like a standard IPS display, and we aren't really sure whether this is a good or bad thing, but another thing that we note is that there actually isn't any form of ABL per se, so you can have a small window of white, a full window of white, and the brightness will pretty much stay the same. Now, how this will affect the OLED panel in the long run, we can't really say for sure, but our suggestion is to definitely, well, hit into Windows setting and turn off the display if your system is idle for at least 15 minutes or so, and that will at least help with prolonging the life of the OLED panel itself. But again, I would say pros and cons here, and in our books, we would say that Razer, well, they are being Razer. They have definitely taken gamers first and foremost into account, and this is definitely preferred for us gamers. I very much like this actually. Just do note that this variant of the Blade will burn a hole in your wallet for sure. For this specific model, it will set you back a whopping 5,699 Singapore dollars or 3,299 US dollars. That is a lot of money. And you can't even opt for something a little more affordable at the moment, as this is the only SKU available right now, at least at the time of filming. But okay, you ask, what else do you actually get for that amount of money? The keyboard and trackpad are fantastic, and if you've been following this channel, you will know that I really like the keyboard and trackpad on Razer Blades. The Blade is pretty much on top of the list when it comes to this for Windows-based laptops, only really beaten by the MacBooks and on par with that of the Surface laptop. It does have some quirks, sure, but it's by far one of the best, and there's no lack of RGB either. Speakers are also really good, and as far as I could remember, pretty much improved from before, which was already great. It can get really loud without distorting even at max volume, and there's great stereo separation thanks to the position of the speakers. Bass is of course lacking, but the highs and mids are clean and crisp. No complaints here. As for the battery, you still get the same 80Wh battery found in the previous Blades. However, if you're running the OLED at 240Hz, do expect battery life to be closer to 5 hours rather than 6. While it's not the best battery life out there, it's still pretty respectable. Oh, and of course, that was done using the hybrid graphics mode using the iGPU. If you were to change it to the dedicated graphics mode using the Mark switch, it will only last you roughly an hour or so definitely do take note. And of course, ports are plenty with the Razer Blade 15 OLED. There's a total of 3 standard Type-A USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports, 1 Type-C USB 3.2 Gen 2, as well as 1 Type-C Thunderbolt 4 port, full-size HDMI 2.1, an SD card reader, and 3.5mm combo jack. But now let's talk performance, and we're also going to give you a little bit of advice on what are the best settings to use when using the Razer Blade 15 OLED or any other Razer Blades in general in the past couple of years or so. As there's only one SKU available for the OLED display variant, you'll get an Intel Core i9-12900H, NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3070 Ti, 16GB of DDR5 RAM running at 4800 megatransfers per second, and 1TB of PCIe 4.0 SSD storage. With Razer Synapse, you'll get access to quite a few options such as a quick switch for the refresh rate, the Mark switch itself, and various power profiles available. For all testing, we made sure to run a Blade 15 OLED using the discrete graphics with a high GPU setting, and we tested on some of the power profiles for the CPU, which we'll mention as we go along. Without further ado, let's start with Cinebench R23. In the balance setting, the Core i9-12900H was able to score roughly 10,407 in multi-core and 1,749 in single-core. Changing it to the high CPU setting in Synapse, the score increases to 12,217 and 1,834 respectively. While changing it to the boost CPU setting increases the score yet further to 14,090 and 1,839 respectively. Between each power profile, there's just about a 2,000 score difference for multi-core, and this is largely due to the power limit set for the CPU for each profile. With balance, the Core i9-12900H is limited to just 35 watts, while for the high CPU setting that increases to the proper 45 watts, and with the boost setting chosen, that allows for yet even higher wattage above 45 watts, reaching up to 65 watts or even 70 watts and even more. With DaVinci Resolve, we tested on both the high and boost CPU profiles, and as you can tell, there is quite a sizable difference in render speeds at both 1080p and 4K between the two profiles. Of course, with boost enabled, the fans definitely do spin out and generate quite a bit more noise. But if noise isn't a concern wherever you are, well, you will be able to enjoy a substantial improvement in performance, especially for rendering. We then move on to gaming, Razer's bread and butter, and for all gaming tests, we tested on the high CPU and high GPU power profiles. At 1080p, it's basically an awesome gaming experience with no issues at all. Games like Valorant and CSGO are going to run admirably and makes full use of that 240Hz refresh rate, while games like Cyberpunk 2077 and Modern Warfare 2 really look stunning thanks to OLED. At 1440p, the visual experience is just even better, and the Core i9-12900H and RTX 3070 Ti combo is simply no slouch, easily tackling esports and AAA titles alike. 1440p is really the sweet spot for most gaming laptops nowadays, offering much improved fidelity over 1080p but not being as demanding as 4K. But best of all, Razer has done a pretty good job with the cooling solution here. Just like with the other Blade 15 advanced models, there are a pair of high-performance fans sucking in cold air from the bottom and pushing it out the back, and paired with a huge vapor chamber, the RTX 3070 Ti stays comfortably at 80 degrees Celsius throughout hours of gameplay. However, we can't really say the same for the Core i9, which constantly hovered around 90 degrees Celsius or more with the occasional spikes to 100 degrees Celsius. Not great for sure. However, there's actually quite an easy fix. As we've mentioned earlier, with the different CPU profile settings, it essentially sets different power targets for the CPU itself. With the high profile selected, that means the full-fat 45 watts that the Core i9-12900H is designed for. However, if you set it to medium instead, that brings the limit down to 35 watts. With the CPU set to medium and the GPU set to high, now both the CPU and GPU will hover right about 80 degrees Celsius throughout an entire gaming session without really losing any frames if at all. If you're primarily going to be using a Blade for gaming, we highly suggest going with this profile setting for the best performance to thermal ratio per se. And so, there you have it. The Razer Blade 15 OLED is basically just like any other Razer Blade 15 with the exact same specs, except it now sports a beautiful high refresh rate OLED display. Personally, I really like the Blade, and this is by far the best Blade, hands down. If you really like the aesthetic and you don't mind burning a hole in your wallet for a couple of months or more, this is honestly actually a fine purchase that will definitely serve you well. For myself though, I would probably lean towards the Blade 14 Mercury edition because, well, I don't really have that much cash to spare, and I actually quite like the look of the new Mercury edition. But that's me. On a side note, had this come out earlier and we had a chance to review it earlier, it might have actually won the overall category for Best of 2022 laptops. It really is that good. But well, it is what it is. If you have any questions, let us know in the comment section down below. If you'd like to, do check out the affiliate links as well. If you do, thanks for the support. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Till the next one. See ya!